Hey, it's Nubia here with the Beyond the Sun podcast. And today we are shedding light on a topic. And that topic is spring and what that means, how we can take a cue from nature and figure out how we want to plan, plant, and propagate in our garden that is our life. So, in the Northern Hemisphere, March 20th, which happens to be tomorrow, I'm recording this on Sunday. March 20th is this year's spring equinox. And that means that the length of daylight hours and darkness are approximately equal. So the length of daylight equals the number of hours or the length of darkness. And that is, if we look at nature, that's really something that we could really take advantage of in terms of the daylight hours. Let's take a cue from nature here. So I have some notes in front of me, which I'll be referring to so that I can keep myself on track. But let's take a cue from nature. So nature appears to be imbalanced. If we've heard of all the things that are happening, snow in San Diego, California, not just flurries, but like heavy snow. We have seen earthquakes. That's not really necessarily weather related, but we've seen a lot of what appears to be imbalance. But I would argue that nature is aiming to bring itself back into balance. And that's why all of these things, not why, so I don't want to say causation, but I would argue that when nature appears to be imbalanced, just like in our bodies, let's say sometimes people consider autoimmune diseases to be the body attacking itself, when really the body is really trying to regain a sense of homeostasis. And so a lot of things are imbalanced so that it can bring itself back into balance. That is another topic for another day, and I am no expert on that, but that's just my perspective. So while we are taking a cue from nature, let's take some dedicated time to be still and assess where we are. That's what I'm doing because I'm feeling a bit imbalanced in all transparency. So, how are you feeling right now? Ask yourself that. How are you feeling right now? What was the best thing you experienced today? If that was waking up, let's acknowledge it. If that's having the capacity to listen to this podcast, this ray of light, and allow it to shed some light back on you, acknowledge that. What was an important lesson that you learned in the past 24 hours or the past week? That's a good question to reflect on in our stillness. So these are tangible things that when we don't see nature naturing, we plant some seeds one day, and then 2, 3 days have passed and we realize, oh, look, there's a little shoot coming up out the soil. So let's follow nature's cue. And if we feel imbalanced, ask ourselves, how does feeling balanced feel? If you don't know, how do you imagine it to feel? Then ask, how can you tap into feeling balanced when you feel out of balance? And we're not talking about balance meaning everything is done, because in nature, things have different life cycles and things have different rate of growth. When I say things, let's say it's time, to plant maybe tomatoes, and tomatoes doesn't grow as quickly as okra or something like that. I'm not a gardener. I don't even have a green thumb, but um, one thing that is coming up for me is my my anniversary of when I got my locks installed. And that was late April. So that was in the spring. And my loctician gave me a little a little cutting of one of her plants. And I thought that was such a beautiful gesture and of symbology. Is that a word? I thought that was such a beautiful gesture and a beautiful symbol of a new phase in life, a new growth phase. And when I visited her yesterday to get my locks retightened to get the new growth, you know, back into this pattern that the rest of the locks are in, something that she mentioned was, just like our locks, that plant, even though it came from the same core plant, d- my locks and everyone else's hair is not the same, has a different rate of growth. Everybody might have taken care of the plant at a different, with different amounts of care or different types of care, and everybody's, you know, dwelling is not receiving the same kind of light, or watering rates are different. So basically, I'm just sharing all of that to reiterate, how do you get into balance? Because even in nature, things are balanced and things are not symmetrical. Things are not necessarily mirroring one another, but there is balance in nature. So when you're feeling imbalanced, how can you acknowledge that? Take a moment to be still, and then imagine what feeling balanced feels like. For example, for me, I said that I'm feeling a bit imbalanced. And for me, I'm feeling physically tired because I'm making an adjustment of going back into a physical, I'm making a commute to go to my 9 to 5. And I'm physically tired because I have more preparation involved. And that's different from working from home, when I've worked from home for, man, since at least 2014. So I'm feeling more drained. And I also feel like I'm not making enough time for myself. So what do? I take a moment and say, what do I imagine would help me feel balanced? And for me, that would be, oh, I would love to practice my instrument. And even though I'm at a beginner level, so then when I go to think of, oh, how do I feel when I practice my instrument? I feel discouraged. I feel frustrated because I'm not yet an expert. But guess what? I want to embrace the process of growth instead of getting in my own way and being hard on myself. So let's talk about spring. The spring equinox is tomorrow. What kind of plan will you make after first taking stock of where you are? Imagine you're a farmer. You have a healthy plot of land. You assess the soil, you assess what would be good to grow right now for the future. What kind of seeds are you going to plant right now? Take stock of where you are right now. And then think of type of what type of experience do you want to have? You cannot control the yield necessarily in terms of you can plant a bunch of seeds, but you don't know that they'll all yield a high um, volume of your crop. But you can do you can take the steps that are needed to ensure that you do everything in your power. And then you rely on nature. You partner with nature to do what nature does. So, as a farmer, as a gardener, you also need to make sure that you plant your seeds without going back to dig them up. This is all metaphorically speaking. If you're planting seeds, you don't go back in to dig them up just to see if they're growing. You just instead take the actions, be consistent. And if that action involves being still, that's what you need to do. Being still does not mean that you are not being productive, because we all know that what we see on the outside comes from an idea. So I invite you to take time, connect with nature, connect with the earth, tune in, be ready to listen, to receive a message, and then then plant your seeds, and then allow those seeds to propagate. So I hope this Sunray shed light on what it means to experience the type of life that you want by taking a cue from nature. There is balance. There are things that you cannot control. And then there are things that you can control. So do what you can control. Tap into feeling the feeling of what it does, what you imagine to feel balanced to be, and then go within to receive the next action step to take based on that. Everything is not necessarily always action, but you do have to plan, and you do have to plant the seeds without disturbing it. Just go on about your way. Okay, that was a sunray to shed light on planning, planting, and propagating in your garden of life. So tune in next time. Let me know one thing that you're going to do. What's one thing that helps you feel balanced? And what action step are you going to do, or what action step are you going to do to at least plan, plant, or propagate in your garden of life? Let me know. Talk to you next time.